The origins of Wray Fair are lost in the mist of time, but the first actual record we've got of it is a photograph taken in 1894, and it shows all the local farmers down with one or two animals, and they're outside the Georgian Dragon trying to sell them. That's a crowd of roughly 100 people, I would think. They're scattered about, selling heifers, donkeys, things like that, the odd dog. And the trouble with the fair in those days was it was based outside the pub, and as you can imagine, the result was it was a good day for the men who came down from the hills. The church and the chapel didn't really approve of the fair for obvious reasons, and in all the parish magazines they call it that day rather than Wray Fair. Now this dwindled on, I suppose, until 1914 when the First World War put paid to it, and it started up again between the wars, and the same thing happened with the Second World War. In the 1960s it was restarted, and it was rather like any fair in any village. You had goldfish in jam jars and you had to throw a ping pong ball into it, or coconut shies, hooplas, that sort of thing, and there'd be the odd group selling jam or selling honey, and very little money was made, but a good time was had by everybody in the village. The real change came in the 80s when it was really revitalised after Wray Flood, and lots of people got together and decided the fair really needed a big boost. It was quite difficult to do because there's only so much money people could actually spend, but the origin of the Scarecrow Festival starts round about at 1989-1990. My wife and I were travelling in the Pyrenees, and we stopped near a village called Campan, and this village were actually having a Scarecrow Festival. I first actually noticed the scarecrow, well at the time I thought it was a real person, actually hanging by the neck from a tree, and it was swaying in the breeze. I went to photograph it to go down to the local police station with the evidence, and the closer I got, it became obvious it was actually a scarecrow. We went into the village and there were scarecrows everywhere. They were in the church, in the shops, in the pubs, in the streets, looking over walls. But there was nobody looking at them. It was just a deserted village. It was actually sort of 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so I imagine everybody was having their lunch. But we brought the idea back to Wray, and we had the Scarecrow Festival in 1992. We had no idea how this was going to work. We had no idea if people would make scarecrows, but the committee decided to waste, for want of a better word, waste roughly £300 on prizes. The first prize would be £100, the second prize would be £75, there'd be two £55 prizes, and so on. And spend all the £300 on the Scarecrow Festival, hoping that people from outside the village would come and look at them, and seeing what a good village it was, they would come to the fair. The fair itself on that year, well, we didn't expect what actually happened. We had thousands of people, we had nowhere for them to park, we hadn't enough cups of tea for them, we hadn't enough toilets for them, but somehow we struggled through. And from making something like £300 on the fair, we actually multiplied by 10 and got £3,000 or £4,000 profit. I think it was in 1992, it might have been 93, we started the Scarecrow Festival, and the very first one we had no idea how it was going to work. The committee kept running around to see if anybody was actually putting up a scarecrow, and when the first one appeared, it was done by Christine Conda, we all got very excited and went home and made our own. But on the Saturday, when it was actually supposed to start, there were still only about 10 out at 9 o'clock in the morning, but by the afternoon I think we'd gone up to roughly 50 scarecrows, and the whole committee kept walking up and down the street to look at them. News travels fast in the Lune Valley, and many people actually started coming on the Saturday afternoon to look at them. By the Sunday, there were roughly 100 scarecrows actually out in the streets and on the surrounding farms. But the magical thing that happened was on the Monday, when, just by pure chance, a lady from ITV came past on a motorbike and she saw it. There was a knock on my door. Would it be alright if they came with a camera crew and photographed it? Well, you don't say no to television, so obviously the answer was yes. On the Wednesday, when it was on the television, there were about 180 scarecrows, and they had a wonderful day. It was on the television, and the numbers from Wray Fair went up from roughly 50 to about 4,000. We were over the moon about this, and everybody thoroughly enjoyed it. The village street was packed, there were cars everywhere, and there was a real buzz about the place. You don't turn a good idea down, so it went on the next year. Probably one of the better years for me was the VE Day, and that was in 1995, where we had a theme, and the theme was the actual Normandy Landings. And everybody seemed to love the 1940s one. The local charity shops were inundated with calls looking for very old clothes to dress the scarecrows in, and the imagination of the village was absolutely fantastic. There were parachutes on roofs, the Red Baron came, there were washerwomen, there were people selling nylon stockings, the American Army arrived, and of course scarecrows dressed as girls for the American Army, parachutes in trees around the village, and in fact one funny incident was the police were called because one passerby thought it was a real parachutist who'd actually crashed his plane and landed in the tree. The police were not amused. The giant scarecrows. Well, what in fact happened, other places saw that we were actually doing really rather well with our Scarecrow Festival, and they started copying. Kettlewell was one, and the Isle of Wight is another. The Isle of Wight actually rang up and asked if they could borrow our scarecrows. Absolutely no way. We actually told them to make their own. Well, when we realised that all these other places were doing the scarecrows, we thought really a good idea might be if we could come up with something new. We'd seen the photographs of the giant scarecrows in Barcelona, and we thought we'd have a go at this. We had some help from two people in Manchester who came up and helped us make the first two giants. They're roughly 14 foot high, and a man gets inside them, or a woman gets inside them, and they walk around with them, they walk them down the street in them. The first two were such a success that we decided we'd make some more, and we've got half a dozen now. And with these half a dozen scarecrows, we actually have a grand parade on a Friday night, and they walk from one end of the village to the other, or they usually with a band. The giants really do make ours rather special, our village rather special, because none of the others have attempted to actually copy that. And we've had them now for 7 years, 8 years, and they're going down really well. On one occasion, a member of the Tate from the Tate Gallery was actually passing through the village and happened to see them, and he asked if he could borrow one. It was one of Jimmy Saville, and they took it down to the Tate Britain, and actually it was on show for nearly 3 months. They also did a video of the village to actually go with it. That was a much travelled scarecrow. I believe it went to Paris, and I'm not sure about New York, but certainly that was one of the understandings. One of Churchill went all over the north of England. It was a moving scarecrow done by Kath Halstead, and that went all over the place, actually moving, doing the Victory V sign in an exhibition of VE Day. The blood donors have borrowed one. That goes around, and they've still got it, that goes around all the villages in the north of England, all the towns in the north of England, places like Sheffield, Nottingham, Manchester. And the idea is they put it out in the main square, people come and actually look at the scarecrow, and while they're there, the blood donors come out and make sure they get their name on a piece of paper.
And how can Wray stay ahead of the game?
Well, obviously that's one of the problems, and the enthusiasm doesn't seem to have waned yet. People are still making scarecrows, but I think somehow we're going to have to come up with a new idea which actually makes our village slightly better than all the others that are doing it. If you look on the website for scarecrows, you'll see there's probably 20 other Scarecrow festivals, and 6 of them within 100 miles of here. So we're going to have to come up with a new idea. The way ours is different from all the others is that it culminates with the Wray Fair, and Wray Fair on the Bank Holiday Monday is the highlight of the year in this village. I don't think any of the other villages have this sort of impetus or final show right at the end. One idea has always been possibly to have a big bonfire and burn them all at once, but that really reminded us too much of Wickerman. But we haven't actually come up with a new idea yet, but there is a meeting straight after Wray Fair this year where we're going to see if we can come up with some new ideas just to make our village even more special than it actually is.